Similar here is 20 gauge at 16 on center. You double layer drywall that, you're at a 44. Okay. Pretty amazing number, because we see this all the time in really high-end condos or in soundproof booths in commercial office spaces. This wall is a very expensive wall. 20 gauge at 16 on center with double layer drywall each side, and you're hitting a 44. Whereas you could go to a 25 gauge at 24 inches on center with a single layer of drywall each side, and you would still be at a 44, and you'd be saving $5 or $6 a square foot. So that's why we always want to start with, you have to work smart and not work hard. Don't just throw up thick, heavy studs and lots of drywall. Okay, I'll skip ahead. So this is one number we want you to take with you today. And we have samples available, but obviously we're on the Zoom today. So kind of our flagship products, and I'll talk product agnostically here. We call it wall blocker, but EVA-based mass-loaded vinyls with a single 1 pound per square foot 1/8 inch thick layer on 25 gauge studs at 24 inches on center, you hit an STC 56. It's our flagship because this is the cheapest way to achieve an STC 55 plus wall possible. You're adding an 1/8 of an inch thickness to the wall. Your studs are thinner, so they're cheaper. They're lighter, so you're saving structural. They're spaced further apart, so you're saving labor and material there, and you're just using one layer of drywall on each side. So once again, saving a lot of weight, and you're saving a lot of schedule. You're not double layering it. So what we've developed is, I'll come back to that in a moment, a list of STC-rated assemblies with all kinds of assemblies. 2x4 at 24 on center, 25 gauge and 20 gauge at 16 and 24 on center, with and without membranes. And this is all on our website. Right here, you can see all of our CA approved, tested assemblies, staggered wood stud, double metal stud for all of our movie theater clients. Single metal stud's very common to save thickness, but also get a very good STC if you have 24 inch on center spacing. And on each of these, you can click on it and the submittal will download. These are a little bit heavy, a couple megabyte files I'll come back to in a moment. And it has your test data, your UL rating, and all that kind of submittal data that you would need to get your partition approved. So why do people use 20 gauge instead of 25 or 16 instead of 24 on center? The number one reason we always hear is stud height limitation. Okay, here is ASTM, I think it's like C523. It's the ASTM governing specification for stud heights. And you can see for a 25 gauge stud, okay, over on this side, and stud depth very common is a 3 5/8 or 3 1/2. Your deflection limit is how straight you need that wall. If it needs to be like a level 5 finish, beautiful hotel lobby kind of deal, then you need your L over 360. And at 24 inches on center, 25 gauge stud, you can go 12 feet high. That is every apartment I've ever been in my life. I don't know if I've seen too many 12-foot or higher apartments for the demising and corridor walls. But even if you need it at 13 feet, you need to consider that we could go with a slightly looser deflection limit. And I know architects and contractors don't love that thought, but you have to give the developer or the owner or manager a decision of, do I want slightly less straight walls, which are still L over 240 is still perfectly acceptable for the vast majority of applications, or do I want a much more soundproof wall? And when you look at that acoustic design as a trade-off, you will start seeing that 25 gauge at 24 on center is really your architect's best friend. It's the cheapest, fastest way to hit a very good STC rating, especially when coupled with the right additive products if you need a 50 plus. Brief product comparison here. And we're getting to the stopping point. So any questions anybody has, go ahead and type in now so I can kind of look at them in just a moment. So very common ways to soundproof. We've already talked about stud spacing. If you don't have a stud height limitation or load bearing walls, move to 25 gauge at 24 on center, or at least do one of the two. Okay. Then your questions are, do I add a membrane? Do I double layer drywall? Do I move to Quiet Rock or Soundbreak or some other kind of acoustically enhanced drywall? Here's a quick data set for you. Wall blocker and membranes sell for anywhere from 60 cents to $1 a square foot. And install is like sound bats or excuse me, thermal bat insulation. So you're looking at 20 to 70 cents a square foot per install. So you're looking at 80 cents to $1.50 a square foot to add 11 points, up to 11 points on a flexible assembly. Double layering drywall is almost never the answer because of the huge wall thickness gains and the schedule change. And an acoustically enhanced drywall is a consideration, especially if you need no wall thickness addition. But something that we like to show as a, per square foot, it can be very economical to add a membrane or other soundproofing product rather than just double layering drywall. This is an award we won in Orlando last year, the National Multifamily Housing Council's Innovation Award, designing new ways to soundproof apartments. But as I mentioned, with all of our different STC-rated assemblies, it just depends on what you need. If you're doing an office, if you're doing a school or a hospital, you have all types of different target STCs, and we want to provide architects different ways to achieve those STCs. Some showing how simple installing this type of product is. So on a scissor lift, you put the spool or the roll good. It's 33 feet long. We custom cut it in this case. Usually it comes in 25-foot rolls, 1/8 inch thick. And you go to the top and you put in washers along the top. And as you go down, it retracts and it unspools like kind of like a little toilet paper roll. And you zip it into the studs every 2 feet as you go. And if you hit the studs, you don't have to use tape. A lot of our lab tests show no tape. And in those cases, if it's on the stud, when the drywall goes on to permanently hold it in place, it acts as a gasket and it presses the blocker membrane onto the studs. In this case, for every layer of wall blocker they added, they took away 2 layers of drywall for this movie theater. So we added 2, took away 4 layers of drywall and saved about $7 a square foot, partially due to the wall heights, and increased their STC by 4 points. It's just recent projects, Kaiser Permanente and larger hospitals out west, but all kinds of multifamily and hospitality and movie theaters just across the US and some of our different locations. So I don't see any questions at the moment. The takeaway from that section is this: determine your target STC first. That's depending on your adjacencies. A kitchen next to a bathroom gets this. A hotel room next to a hallway gets this. A classroom next to a music room gets this. You need to determine what target STC you need, and then use the rules of thumb to determine how do you achieve that target STC. It depends on stud gauge. Heavier gauge, 20 gauge, is worse than lighter 25 gauge. Spacing, 24 inch on center is much better than 16 on center. And then finally, if you need 50 plus, you're going to need some kind of extra product. Double layer drywall, Quiet Rock type product, or a wall blocker type product, or a combination of them to achieve your target STCs. What side of the wall do you apply the product? Thank you, Melton. So you apply the product. Generally, rule of thumb is it doesn't matter. When you get a lab test, you actually test it on each side of the wall and you average the 2 scores. And very rarely is there even a 1 STC difference. However, rule of thumb in the industry is you apply it to the source side. So the side that's louder. If you've got a band room next to a classroom, you put it on the band room side. But our experience in the lab tests tell you that it doesn't matter. Thank you for the question. Okay, I'm going to keep moving, and then if you guys have questions, which I hope you do, just draw them in down there, and I'll answer as we go. So that's sound blocking. Sound blocking is STCs and IICs. So we didn't really spend a lot of time on IICs. I think it's better understood. If you have IIC questions, we also have a number of resources on the website, as well as our technical staff to kind of answer those questions. The number one thing you want to keep in mind with IICs is don't ever, this will be a mouthful, don't ever spot treat with a sub-gypcrete underlayment. What I mean by that is if you've got plywood or OSB and you're putting 1.5 or 3/4 inch gypcrete, you know, cementitious concrete on the, or gypsum-based concrete on the OSB, a lot of times we see Acoustimat 1 or some other entangled plastic just going underneath the gypcrete where the LVT is going to be. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this in the field, and you use a tapping machine test and you say, hey, this is supposed to be a 50 and it's a 36. You know, what could have gone wrong? If you're only putting the Acoustimat under the gypcrete where the LVT is going to go, you know, in 2 more months, it's so easy for the sound of the footfall to get into the LVT, get into the gypcrete, and just go right around the Acoustimat. So if you're using Acoustimat or another sub-gypcrete underlayment, you need to have full coverage. Think of it as a bathtub. You know, the water is going to run out on either side or through a drain if you don't have full coverage. If you use an underlayment like our Acoustic Step or floor blocker on top of the gypcrete, then you can spot treat because you're no longer letting that footfall get into that rigid gypcrete substrate. So it's a little bit of a technical discussion, but like I mentioned, we have resources on the websites. Don't hesitate to reach out with those kinds of questions. Can you, and by the way, can you fix it afterwards? There's a lot of things for acoustics you can do afterwards. For echo reduction or absorption, you can definitely do a lot of topical treatments for that and a lot of aftermarket options. For sound masking or open office applications or things of that nature, there's a lot of aftermarket options. For soundproofing, you can never go back. And I don't mean to be too much doom and gloom there, but we get calls all the time from property managers or condo owners. I want to fix, you know, what can I do for my ceiling? What can I do for the floor above? The answer is after it's built, the cost of retrofitting that situation and fixing, improving the IIC and STC is so high, you'd be better off just gutting the entire place. So that's why we start with soundproofing for our lunch and learn.